Means not only a college education, but the right to enter a trade school, the right to learn how to become a carpenter or a plumber or a sheet metal worker and get one of the many important jobs that keep our society going. In other words, we will make a full and complete education a human right in America to which all of our people are entitled. This means making public colleges, universities, and HBCUs tuition-free and debt-free by tripling the work-study program, expanding Pell Grants, and other financial incentives. Today, we are entering a proposal which will allow every person in this country to get all of the education that they need to live out their dreams because they are Americans. Further, in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, it is simply not acceptable that our younger generation, through no fault of their own, will have a lower standard of living than their parents, more debt, lower wages, and less likelihood of owning their own homes. That is why this proposal completely eliminates student debt in this country and ends the absurdity of sentencing an entire generation, the millennial generation, to a lifetime of debt for the crime of doing the right thing, and that is going out and getting a higher education. 10 years ago, the United States government bailed out Wall Street after their greed, their recklessness, and their illegal behavior drove us into the worst recession in modern history. Today, the major Wall Street banks are larger than ever, their profits are soaring, and their CEOs receive huge compensation packages. Our proposal, which costs $2.2 trillion over 10 years, will be fully paid for by a tax on Wall Street speculation, similar to what exists in dozens of countries around the world. The American people bailed out Wall Street. Now it is time for Wall Street to come to the aid of the middle class of this country. This Wall Street tax will have the added benefit of controlling Wall Street recklessness and reducing the likelihood of another major economic crash. In 1944, as World War II was coming to an end, the U.S. government did the right thing and passed the GI Bill, which made higher education free to all of those who served in the armed forces. That act not only improved the financial well-being of millions of men and women, but it also laid the groundwork for a great expansion of the American middle class. In the 1960s and 1970s, the federal government and state governments invested heavily in higher education, with the result that college tuition was virtually free for millions of young people. 40 years ago, a federal Pell Grant paid for nearly 80% of tuition, fees, room and board at a four-year college. Well, unfortunately, things have changed over the years and changed in a bad way. Today, it will cost over $21,000 each and every year to attend some of these very same schools which 50 years ago were virtually free. Today, Pell Grants cover only 30% of college expenses. And here are the results of federal and state higher education cutbacks. Today, the average college senior graduates with about $30,000 in student debt, and 1 out of 6 seniors will graduate with over $50,000 in debt. The situation is even worse for African American and Latino families. And at a time when we desperately need more doctors and dentists and nurses, those who are graduating medical school and dental school and nursing school are finding themselves in some cases with $300,000 or $400,000 in debt. And here is a sad truth, another sad truth regarding this whole crisis. Many students are dropping out of college, not getting their degrees, and yet they still find themselves with tens of thousands of dollars in debt. Let's be clear. The millennial generation was told that the only way they would get the good jobs available is if they received a college education. Unfortunately, that turned out to be bad advice. It was wrong. Since 2000, the cost of attending a public college has nearly doubled. Meanwhile, the bottom 60% of college graduates earn less money than those who graduated college did 19 years ago, and wages for the average college graduate have stagnated. Today, 34% of Americans 25 and older have a college degree, but only 26% of them in our country, 26% of those jobs require a college education. The result is that many millions of young people today are forced to work at low-wage jobs. Their standard of living is going down while they are struggling to pay off their outrageously high level of student debt. Bottom line is we should not be punishing people for getting a higher education. It is time to hit the reset button. Under the proposal that we introduced today, all student debt would be canceled in 6 months. By taking this action, we not only provide immediate financial relief to 45 million Americans who have $1.6 trillion in debt, but we will be improving the entire economy. According to a recent study, canceling all student debt would add an estimated $1 trillion to our economy over the next decade and create up to 1.5 million jobs. Let me just conclude by giving you a tale of two crises. 10 years ago, because of their greed and illegal behavior, Wall Street banks were on the verge of collapse, and the United States Congress, with taxpayer assistance, came to their aid. Well, now we got millions and millions of families in this country who are struggling with outrageous levels of student debt. And maybe instead of just worrying about Wall Street, we start worrying about those families and that generation and give them a break.
That's right.
So this is for those families, this is for those young people, this is for the economy, and this is for justice. And that is what we are proposing. Thank you all very much.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Pramila Jayapal. I'm proud to represent Washington's 7th Congressional District and to be the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. And I want to start just by thanking Senator Sanders, who back in 2015 was the only person at the federal level, at the national level, talking about a real solution for the student debt crisis. It was a part of my campaign. At that time, I was in the Washington State Senate. And I quickly, when I came to Congress, was proud to stand with the senator as we introduced last cycle's College for All bill. And we are now today, it is sizzling hot today, and this is a sizzling hot proposal. And I'm looking at all these young people's faces over here and seeing the incredible hope and opportunity that exists when we pass this proposal. Let me also thank my colleague, Representative Ilhan Omar, who is our whip for the Congressional Progressive Caucus in the House, and together she and I will be introducing the two companion bills that make up Senator Sanders' bill in the Senate. None of this would be possible without the incredible organizing across the country. Students who have been rallying on their campuses, teachers, advocates, unions that have been saying we must address the scale and the magnitude of this crisis. So let's just talk about the future. My child just graduated from college, and like thousands of students across the country celebrated their college graduations, most of them are contemplating a lifetime of debt. Since 2015, when I first met Bernie and we were talking about this issue, total student debt in this country has gone from $1.2 trillion to $1.52 trillion. It has increased incredibly, almost 2.5 times over the last decade, from $600 billion to the current $1.5 trillion. And over the past 3 decades, the cost of attaining a college degree, because of decades of austerity spending, where we spend on other things like military defense, many other things, GOP tax cuts under Republican control. Unfortunately, the cost of attaining a college degree has increased more than $1,000. So let's be clear about what this means. We are incentivizing our young people to not go and get a higher education. We are telling them to not go and get a trade or a vocational skill or a 4-year degree that will allow them to build a decent life. And even though we know we depend on these next generations to be our innovators, our creators, to carry jobs that allow them to have a future and buy homes and cars and build our economy, instead we are putting out a giant trap for people to walk into. And as a nation, we are killing ourselves by draining the enthusiasm, innovation, creativity, and potential of our next generation. And let's be clear that it doesn't just affect millennials. The fastest growing group of people with student debt in this country is grandparents, people over 60. People in their 30s have the most percentage of the student debt held. And of course, our millennials are looking at a future that does not have hope. 60% of white students across our country have student debt burdens, students of color even more. 87% of black students have to borrow to attend a 4-year college. And African American women who graduate with a college degree are paying about 111% of their first year salary in student loans. So anyone thinking about going to college today has to be asking these questions. They've got to be looking at the trade-offs and saying, do I go and get a higher education, which I know I need, by the way, in order to get a job that is going to sustain me and my family? But if I do, I know I'm coming out with mountains of debt. Or do I forgo that training and skills and just hope that somehow I can find a job that allows me to build for the future? My constituents, all of our constituents, have been writing us with their horror stories, which, by the way, are confirmed by the Federal Reserve, which says that people are putting off buying homes and cars and even getting married or having kids because they can't afford it. And just yesterday, I was out buying something, and the person who was helping me told me that she has $60,000 in student loan debts. And she said, but don't tell my story alone, tell my sister's story. Her sister struggled with addiction. And so in her second year of college, after 2 years, she dropped out so she could take care of herself, get herself clean, which she did. She came back, she worked a full-time job at a minimum wage salary, and she went to college full-time online. She got through all of that, and guess what she's saddled with now? $100,000 in debt. It's unacceptable. And so today, this proposal is a way to address all of that. The college affordability crisis isn't just about tuition. And in this proposal, we make sure that we increase Pell Grant funding, we expand that funding, we triple work study, as Senator Sanders said, and taken together, we will provide debt relief for the 44 million people who have existing debt, and we will free the future. In a federal-state partnership, the House College for All Act completely eliminates tuition and fees at public colleges, community colleges, trade schools, or apprenticeship programs. As the senator said, we continue to invest in HBCUs and minority institutions, in tribal colleges. We make sure we take care of everybody, and in the end, we make sure that we stop profiteering off of student loans. Let's free the generations to come. Let's invest in our future. Let's be bold and revolutionary and create real opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Senator Sanders and Congresswoman Jayapal for joining us to introduce this revolutionary idea. I stand before you on behalf of 45 million Americans, 45 million people who feel they can't purchase their first home, 45 million people who feel like they can't start a family, 45 million people who have dreams of opening up a business or going to public service but are held back by a mountain of debt. 45 million who are wondering if they can retire because of the loans they took out for themselves or on behalf of their children. They are the debt generation. Many of them played by the rules, followed the advice of our parents, our leaders, and got an education. We are told going to college opens a world of opportunity, but far too many, it's accompanied by a world of anxiety, stress, and never-ending debt. We are told by some politicians that this debt is our fault, that if we want to achieve the American dream, we have to lift ourselves up by our bootstraps. Well, we're here today to say student debt is not the result of bad choices or behavior. It is the result of a system that tells students to get an education and go to college in order to have a stable life, but then does not provide the resources to afford that education. It is the result of a two-tiered education system, one for the rich, whose families can afford tens of thousands of dollars for higher education, and another for the poor and the middle class who have to pay off that education for the rest of their lives. America's collective debt now sits at almost 1.6 trillion. Nearly 45 million Americans now have student debt, and the amount of debt an average student carries is rising. Young adults who graduated college with student debt now have a negative net worth, with median net worth that is less than the $90,000 it was in 2013. And parents are increasingly jeopardizing their retirement to pay off loans they took out on behalf of their kids so they can go to college. The scourge of student debt does not affect all Americans equally. Students of color face a higher risk of defaulting on their loans and struggle to find jobs to pay off these loans due to discriminatory hiring practices. First-generation and immigrant college students face much higher rates of default. And women who already face a wage gap and workplace discrimination owe 2/3 of a total student loan debt. That's why when I ran for Congress, I was asked over and over again, why is Washington ignoring this crisis? And what will I do to help fix it? And I promised them that I would do everything in my power to end the scourge of student debt once and for all. And so today I am excited to join my colleagues in keeping that promise. What my bill does is simple as it is revolutionary, as Senator Sanders says. It cancels all of 1.6 trillion student loan debt. No exceptions, no questions asked, full cancellation. Americans will no longer wonder if they can buy a home or start a family or open a business or retire. You might ask, why full cancellation? What about the people who can pay off their student debt? Well, let me say this. The children of Donald Trump aren't asking or taking out student loans. Canceling student debt is a problem of the poor and the middle class, not of the rich. So rather than making exceptions, let's end this crisis entirely once and for all. You might also ask, who will pay for it? Well, economic estimate that forgiving student debt will generate up to $1 trillion in economic activity. But we can go a step farther. And as I always say, America does not suffer from scarcity. We suffer from greed. So we can ask speculators on Wall Street to pay a small financial transaction tax, which would fully fund student loan forgiveness over 10 years. The American people bailed out Wall Street. It's time for Wall Street to bail out the American people. So today is a proud moment. Since 2015, Senator Sanders has been talking about this crisis, offering a solution, and now we have the momentum to go forward. And I'm really excited about this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited here today. What a beautiful day to liberate ourselves from student debt. What a beautiful day to liberate our future generations from the scourge of for-profit education. And by that, we also mean for-profit student loan debt as well. This is such an important issue because this is not just about our future generations and our current generations, but this is about our entire economy. We are experiencing a systemic and economy-wide threat to grinding our economy to a halt because families and people in my generation, older and younger, are not buying cars, we're not purchasing homes, we are not building families because of the scepter that student loan debt represents on our generation. It is unjust, and it is a burden that no generation before had to encounter to the scale and the level that ours has. I think so much about this moment when I was in college, and I was mentoring this girl, this young woman. Her name was Andrea. She was about 3 or 4 years younger than me. But I was about 19 years old, and she was in high school. And she had gotten into all of these prestigious universities. But she was given no student loan assistance, she was given no scholarships. All of her student aid was presented to her in the form of loans. And she came from a solid middle-class family. She was not exceedingly wealthy. And so she got into her dream college, but her dream college offered her no scholarships, just loans. And she truly felt, at 16, 17 years old, she felt that the decision of college was so important that she felt that she needed to consider taking on $250,000 worth of debt to go to college. And she's 17 years old, and here I am calling her from my dormitory, a 19-year-old consulting a 17-year-old about a $250,000 loan debt situation. And I think that in and of itself illustrates the absurdity of our education financing system. That alone illustrates it. Because what we tell 17-year-olds all the time is that you are not old enough or responsible enough to drink. You are not old enough or responsible enough to vote. You are not old enough or responsible enough to serve in our military, but you are old enough and responsible enough to take on $250,000 worth of debt. And that is wrong. It is not right. Not only is that what we are telling children now, minors now, but that's what we have told them for decades. And it has resulted in a crisis that we have seen today. Now people are in their 30s and older that have taken on insurmountable amounts of debt because we have sold them an empty bill of goods. And what we need to do is make it right. And that is why we have to both make public colleges tuition free and forgive all student loan debt at the same time. And I will be completely honest, I will disclose my personal stake in this fight because I have student loans too. And I think it's so funny. A year ago, I was waiting tables in a restaurant, and it was literally easier for me to become the youngest woman in American history elected to Congress than it is to pay off my student loan debt. So that should tell you everything about the state of our economy and the state of quality of life for working people. Because in order for me to get a chance to have health care, in order for me to get a chance to pay off my student loans, I had to do something that was nearly impossible. And I don't think that that is the bar through which a person should be able to access education, health care, and a bevy of other things that should be considered human rights. And this bill, and I'm so excited to be introducing this bill with Senator Sanders, Congresswoman Omar, and Congresswoman Jayapal to make sure that we start and embarking on the solutions to these problems. So thank you very much, and thank you all for giving me a
Randy Weingarten is the president of one of the great unions in this country, the American Federation of Teachers, 1.7 million members. Randy?
Thank you, Brenda.
So, AOC was on one of our town halls with our thousands of members that have student debt. I cannot begin to express the gratitude of the American Federation of Teachers and the 1.7 million members and all of their families for this bill. And let me tell you why. Virtually every one of my members is dealing with student debt, whether it is herself or whether it is her family. Every meeting I go to, or virtually every meeting, I ask people if they have student debt still or a member of their family. In fact, at a town hall we just had with 13,000 people last Monday, a retiree of mine said that her Social Security is being garnished because of student debt. Another member, in tears, talked about how she thought she had public service loan forgiveness. She asked that question each day, and she found out 10 years after, when she was supposed to get her loan forgiven, that she was never even registered for the program. Another member of mine has said because she actually paid the wrong amount by 1 penny, she no longer is eligible for public service loan forgiveness. We are seeing the average student loan for a master's degree in education has jumped 82% between 2002 and 2012. 82%. And the portion of students taking loans have grown from 41 to 67% over that period. And as Representative Omar and Senator Sanders said, I think Representative Jayapal and AOC said it too, as Wall Street was getting their bailout, we now have 41 states in this country that spend less on public education than they did before the recession. So we have a crisis here of immense proportion that we are pauperizing the future generation. And that is why I stand here proudly to do anything our union can do to get this bill passed.
Thank you, Randy. Now I'd like to introduce Pamela Hunt, who is the mother of 4. Pamela?
All right, Pamela.
Hello, my name is Pam Hunt. I have $212,000 of student debt, $51,000 of which is interest alone. I stand before you as a person who pursued a higher degree and was made worse off because of it. I am a proud single parent, and like so many parents, I have worked hard to make sure that my children have the best lives that they can have. I came to Washington, D.C. in 2015 as one of the first student debt strikers in U.S. history. We organized for years, and as a result, some debtors won relief, although I haven't. Over the last 4.5 years, I have struggled financially due to my student debt burden. I lost my home and nearly lost my life in a fight against cancer. But you know what I haven't lost? These illegitimate and immoral student loans that are still haunting me. You know what else I also haven't lost? I haven't lost myself or my desire to fight. I am here to fight, no matter how long it takes, for full debt cancellation and an education system that treats us with dignity and as equals. An education system that's worth fighting for. Right now, many people are not paying back their student loans because they cannot afford to. I've heard that we can't afford to let people go to school for free, but from where I stand, we can't afford not to. I have 3 daughters who, within the past 4 years, have graduated from college with Bachelor of Science degrees. Each is starting life with $50,000 plus in student loan debt. None of them are employed in their field of study, and all of them are on income-based repayment because their income doesn't afford them the ability to make monthly payments. That's just my 3 daughters, 3 stories among countless others. Partial debt forgiveness won't cut it. Even erasing $50,000 would still leave me with a balance of $162,000 in student debt. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am seeking justice. The only justice is full debt cancellation. As a debt collective member and one of the first student debt strikers in U.S. history, I am here to remind you that we are not going away. We are going to build power and liberate ourselves from this crisis. Yes. Thank you.
Great job. Thank you. Thank you, Pamela. Robbie Tribble is from the state of Michigan. Robbie?
First off, I want to thank Senator Sanders and Representatives Omar and Jayapal and AOC as well for everything they're doing regarding tuition-free higher education and issues regarding burdensome student debt. My name is Robbie Tribble, and my family is drowning in debt. We work our hardest, and it seems no matter how hard we work, we will never break even. These days, it seems that being working class means always working and never keeping any of the modest pay we earn. I started organizing against student debt because my wife fell victim to the for-profit education sector. In 2010, she was working at Taco Bell and wanted to get ahead, to better her life. We got married in 2015 and had a son, Braden. When he was 2 months old, we had our tax refund check stolen, or offset, as the Department of Education likes to say, due to our unpaid student loans and at the behest of a predatory school. We applied for relief in 2016, and our application has been ignored by the department for years now. And every time they take our money, they take food off my kid's table, they take the clothes off my kid's back, and the chance for us to build a home, let alone the idea of ever retiring. My wife and I both work, not just full-time, but overtime. We are first-generation students. My parents didn't have the opportunity to go to college. They had a trucking business that went bankrupt. But if they would have had the chance to attend college in the 1970s, they wouldn't be stuck with the lifetime of student debt that we have today. Our families can't afford to be held hostage for trying to make it in our society today. We must cancel all student debt now. Education is a right from pre-K to college. If anyone truly doubts that, I suggest they look into their hearts to see that personal development and knowledge should not be treated as a commodity to be traded on Wall Street. Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much, Robbie. Thomas Gorky is a student from upstate New York. Thomas?
What debts do we really owe to each other? Which debts are moral and should be paid, and which debts are immoral and should be refused? When people get sick, we owe them health care. If they're homeless, they deserve shelter. If somebody wants to learn, they should be able to go to school. These are moral obligations that we are currently defaulting on in our society, and we should start paying them. And we can afford to pay them if we refuse to pay the unjust debt that the 1% impose on us. I want to thank our privatized debt for education system has got to go. I want to thank Representatives Omar and Jayapal and Senator Sanders for this important step that they are taking here today. This legislation establishes free education and a jubilee for all student debt. But we know that they can't make this a reality on their own. It's going to have to be up to all of us. No big change like this ever happens without mass mobilization, without ordinary people getting organized to take direct action and engage in civil disobedience. My student debt is the first thing that I think about when I wake up in the morning and the last thing I think about when I fall asleep. It controls every decision I ever make. Like many others, I often feel overwhelmed, but I also know that if we band together, our debts can make us powerful. In 2015, the Debt Collective organized the first ever student debt strike to force the Obama administration to start discharging student loans from fraudulent for-profit universities. We've won over $1 billion of debt relief. But to set our sights on canceling all $1.6 trillion of student debt, it's going to take an even bigger movement and an even bigger debt strike. So let's get ready. This is our message to the 1%, to Betsy DeVos, to Navient, to Nelnet, to FedLoan and ECMC. We owe you nothing. To our friends, our families, our communities, to humanity and the natural world which makes our lives possible, we owe you everything. So let's get organized. Let's join the Debt Collective and get ready to throw down, because we need to fight for the world that we want to live in. We have a lot of work to do, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I want to thank again Representatives Omar and Jayapal and Senator Sanders. Seriously, we are in your debt. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for a few questions on this issue, just on this issue.
What's your legislation?
Oh, excuse me. Excuse me. Yes.
Senator Sanders, Senator Warren has also released a student debt plan. It's different than yours. Do you hope that the release of your plan will
See, no, that's not what we're here to talk about is this legislation. Any questions on that? Yes, sir, back there. Calm down. Yeah.
What would you say to the millions of Americans that worked hard to already pay off their student debt? And what would you say to critics that say that this will help people that don't necessarily need the help, that are a wealthy group of people that can pay off their student loans?
The overwhelming majority of the people who are going to benefit from this legislation are working class people. And I would say to older people, please remember that when you went to college in America, it was often tuition free. And you had Pell Grants that covered 70, 80% of your expenses. That is not the case today. As you have heard, we have a generation of people who are drowning in debt, can't get married, can't have kids, can't buy their own home. And what I will also tell you, and here is a prediction, that the major opponents of this legislation, mark my words, will be exactly the same people who told us how important it was to bail out Wall Street. And if you could bail out Wall Street, we could bail out the middle class of this country. Yes, ma'am.
As a follow-up to that though, why not have some kind of a limit on income levels so that to prevent that situation where someone who is...
Because I'll tell you why. Because I happen, and I think I speak for everybody up here, believe in universality. And that means that if Donald Trump wants to send his grandchildren to a public school, he has the right to do that. We have public schools in which, in fact, very wealthy kids do attend. Now, our response to making sure that this does not benefit the wealthy is in other areas where we are going to demand that the wealthy and large corporations start paying their fair share of taxes. But we are saying today is public colleges and universities should be tuition-free and debt-free for all Americans. All Americans are entitled to Social Security, entitled to Medicare, entitled to education as a right. Okay, thank you all very much.